Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rogue Agent Answers. My name is the Rogue Agent. Some people call me David Lewis, and every week I answer one of the many life insurance-related questions that I've received from clients, from email subscribers on the daily email list. Questions floated to me from across the interwebs, in the comments sections, which I know you're not supposed to read, or just interactions that I've had with people in real life over the past 20 years, which is a long time. And some of these questions I just scribbled down on scrap pieces of paper. Some of these are stuff I've written down on my phone. Some of it is on Post-it notes scattered all over the office. And every week I answer one of those questions. So if you'd like to ask your question, drop them in the comments section or join my email list for more life insurance tips and advice at therogueagent.com. Also, keep in mind that nothing in this podcast is or should be construed as financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. In fact, nothing that I say in this podcast should be construed even as insurance advice, as I don't give individual advice blanket just across the internet, unqualified, to random strangers. So if you need any of that stuff, contact a licensed professional that you know, like, and trust, preferably someone licensed in your jurisdiction. And now for this week's question. Are there any hidden fees tied to living benefit riders that might eat into my whole life policy's cash value over time? Well, there are typically small fees for activating the rider, but they're not hidden. The insurance company does publish them in your policy contract. So, you can read all about them in the rider brochures from the company. The fee that you're going to pay depends on the rider in question. So there's typically going to be a fee for activating something like a chronic illness or terminal illness rider. But this is likely going to be pretty modest, maybe $100, maybe $300, which might sound like a lot of money depending on, your financial situation. But, when you're talking about benefits that are $1 million or $5 million, $100 to $300 for activation is not that much, relatively speaking. So relative to the benefit that you're getting, rather. A lot of times you can get an advance on your death benefit, somewhere between 25% up to 80% of your death benefit, depending on the carrier. So it's, at least I consider it a small fee. The net effect on your cash value would be minimal since, by the time you'd realistically need one of those benefit riders, your policy would be generating sufficient interest credits to offset any of the fee that the insurer is going to charge. Most probably. I mean, maybe in a really, really small policy, but I just can't imagine. I think for most people, it's going to offset the fee. Next question. Can I turn off a PUA rider on my whole life policy, a paid up additions rider? On my whole life policy, if I decide I don't need it anymore, or is it locked in? You can absolutely turn it off. So, it depends. You can turn off a rider on some companies either temporarily or permanently. So with some companies, allow you to do that. Other companies, you can turn down the payments and pay less. Some companies will if you would change it, it automatically sets a new permanent threshold so that you can't exceed. Right. So if you go from 100 to 50, they don't let you go back up to 100 again. Some companies let you go from 100 down to 25, back up to 100, down to 50, up to 75. Like, you can do whatever you want with it, really, between a minimum and a maximum. So the two most generous companies that I've worked with, or three actually, that I've worked with personally and own policies with, which is how I know how they work, are Penn Mutual, The Guardian, and New York Life. As of this recording, and a lot of people rag on New York Life. They're like, they have an inflexible paid up additions rider. They don't. This could all change in the future. But as of this recording, New York Life is by far the most flexible. And people, I know there's people can't believe that. There's some agents out there I know right now. It's what? As of this recording, again, things can change in the future, but as of this recording, New York Life's paid up additions rider, you could skip it for 2 years. or the minimum payment is $10 a month or $120 per year, and the maximum is a multiple of the base premium. After 5 years, it's like 2 times the base premium, which is more generous than what Guardian offers, which is 1 times the base premium. In the first 5 years, New York Life offers a declining scale. So I think it starts at 10 times your base and it moves to 8, then 6, then 4, I think, and then it settles to 2. So it kind of is on a declining scale. And Guardian sort of works the other way, where it's like I think it's just 3 times the base, and then it drops to 1 times the base. So and Penn Mutual's is 25 times your base premium. Which sounds exciting, except that the way that Penn Mutual kind of locks in the way that Penn Mutual has designed their products, you almost never get to take advantage of that upper limit. So not without mecking your policy anyway. So you kind of fall in line with some of the other 2 carriers, just because of how they've designed their product and certain limitations they put on the term blending, and would just by design, limits, in a practical sense, how much of that upper limit you can use. But it's still very flexible. So with Penn Mutual, you can actually, reduce your paid up additions payments to 0 as long as you meet the minimum payment required. So Penn will look back over the prior 5 years, and if you've made at least 50% of the annual payment limit on your paid up additions rider, you're fine. So for example, if the annual payment limit is $10,000 for the PUA rider, all you have to do is make sure that you've paid in at least $5,000 over the past 5 years. Okay, not $5,000 each year, just $5,000 total over the past 5 years. So Guardian is simpler, $250 a year, and New York Life is $150 or $120 a year. Nothing is locked in per se. You can always drop the rider off the policy. If you don't ever want it, these companies all allow you to just ditch them, just remove it. If you want to keep it, it's wise to keep paying into it and maintain those minimum payments at least. So there's some instances where if you lower the paid up additions rider, again, I think I mentioned this before, the company's going to reset. I think I mentioned this in another Q&A. It feels like I've talked about this before, but companies like Mass Mutual are famous for this. If you lower, and I have a Mass Mutual policy, so I'm not ragging on them, specifically. I own Mass Mutual. I do like the company, but they are famous for doing stuff like that, where if you lower your paid up additions rider payment and you lower it, I think for like 2 or 3 consecutive years, they change it. So your maximum becomes your whatever, I think it's like the average of your prior so many years. They lower it and change it. A lot of companies have something similar to that. If you do that, the smaller mutuals do that too. So, just read over the policy contract, check the details of the rider. So when in doubt, pester your insurance agent for an answer, or just call the carrier. Paid up additions riders are an amazing addition to a whole life policy, but they are considered optional premiums. So, optional. They're not part of the guaranteed level premium, nor are they part of the guaranteed policy provision. So once you make a PUA rider payment, though, it becomes its own guaranteed paid up kind of mini policy that gets stacked on top of your base policy. But it's never going to be a required premium that you have to pay. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It just depends. You're never, the future guaranteed values are always based on that single premium payment that you make into the rider. And it doesn't have ongoing requirements. But on the flip side, you don't have guaranteed future values that are going to exceed the rider. So what I mean by that is if you buy, let's say, $1 million whole life policy, base policy, you start making, let's say $10,000, $15,000, whatever, $1,000 a year premium into it. The premiums, there's a required premium that has to be paid, a guaranteed level premium. So the future value of that contract is going to be $1 million. And it's guaranteed. It's going to be $1 million because that's how it works. With a paid up additions rider, you make one payment of $15,000 into the PUA rider. The guaranteed future value is going to be whatever you just bought with that. Okay. And then the future value is going to be dependent on non-guaranteed dividend payments. So there's, it's just in a sense, think of it like a single premium policy that you just stack on top of your base. So it just works differently, but it is a valuable addition. It helps you, put extra money into a whole life policy that otherwise you wouldn't be able to put in there. So Great question. Thank you for sending that in, and keep sending them in, and I will keep answering them. And I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, that's it for this week's question. If you'd like to add your question to the list, just drop them in the comment section or send me an email. And if you want more life insurance tips and advice, just head on over to
therogueagent.com
and sign up for my daily email list.